first of all, thank you very much, Christophe, for inviting me to talk in front of your team, the digital marketing team of Orange. And we were talking about how digital innovation is a value creation opportunity. And this is the subject that we'll talk about during this presentation. And we'll talk about why understanding what customers want to do is very important to succeed at innovation. So just a few words before we start. So I'm working for Fujitsu. So Fujitsu is a very big IT company. It's number 5 in the world, almost as big as IBM. We have about 150 or 60,000 people that are working at Fujitsu. In many countries, we have about 100,000 patents, and we're a global IT company. I'm Guillaume Villon de Benveniste. That's a super long French name. I'm the author of Les Secrets des Entrepreneurs de la Silicon Valley, which was nominated as a top 10 innovation book published in French.
Wow.
Yep, thank you.
Wow.
Thank you very much.
Great.
Yeah, and so by the Club of Managing Directors, which is financed by the Ministry of the Economy, Salesforce, and Renault, Nissan, and Mitsubishi. I'm in charge of innovation consulting at Fujitsu. Actually, that's the most important thing. And I'm also the author of the Innovation Strategy blog. And I've interviewed Christophe several times on the blog. And I'll be happy to interview you again soon. Okay, so just a few words on why we innovate, because we're all innovators here, but it's important to re-explain why innovation is so important for us and for the economy. And then talk about why succeeding at innovation is so difficult. And finally, one tool to triple the capital efficiency that's dedicated to innovation. So make it 3 times more effective. So let's start out with a quiz. What do all these images have in common?
Tech company logos.
Tech company logos. Yeah. No? Okay.
Consumer focused, maybe?
Okay. Consumer focused companies. Okay.
Innovation?
Innovation.
Yeah.
All right.
International.
International companies. Yeah. So these companies are all technology companies. They're consumer focused, and they're all leaders of the music industry at some time in the last 75 years.
Okay.
And what's interesting is that whenever the product form changes, so for example, this is an audio cassette, this is a CD, it's a different product form, a different assembly of technologies. Whenever there's a change in the product form, the leader of the previous product form loses his leadership position to a new innovative company. Now that's a big deal if you're a shareholder and you just bought shares in Sony in, for example, 1999, because just 2 years out, you'll be losing some of the value. That the share will be lowering in value because it's losing its leadership in the music industry. It's also a big deal if you're working, for example, in sales, because if you're working in sales, you have a lot of buddies in the physical distribution of music. When people go to stores to get CDs, but when the music is turning digital, the distribution of music is also turning digital, and so therefore consumers can buy music directly on their iPod, and they don't have to go to a store to get the music that they want. It's also a big deal if you're working in R&D, because you may have developed great expertise for making audio cassettes better, but this is no longer of any relevance when the product form becomes the CD. And the same is true for the other product forms as well. What's also kind of scary is that the survival rate of the ecosystem, so the suppliers and the distribution players, is only 9%. So, for example, a lot of stores closed down when music was sold in digital form. The supplier that's making the plastic case for the audio cassette is not making plastic case for the CD because there's no need for a plastic case in a CD. And the same is true for all the other product forms. So that means that whenever there's a change in product forms, it's really the entire economy that is disrupted. And it's even more surprising because when we look at what competitive strategies these companies have implemented to keep their leadership, they tried out no less than 8 different competitive strategies, which we all have some awareness of, and we may have implemented ourselves, including investing in R&D. Sony was investing massively in R&D in the early 2000s, and they had were producing 1,200 patents a year. That's a huge number. They were great managers. Steve Jobs, Aiko Morita, who invented the Walkman, also David Sarnoff, who had predicted the email in the 50s. They were improving products. The CD became DVD, and then DVD-ROM, and then Blu-ray. Audio cassettes became video cassettes. They were doing a lot of mergers and acquisitions to make economies of scale. So they were doing a lot of different things to improve their business. And yet, despite all this, they lose their leadership whenever the product form changes. So that's an important fact. It's important to note that today the French economy has digitalized 8% of its economy, 8%. And South Korea, which is the world leader, has digitalized about 9 or 10%. So that means that there's a remaining 92% to be digitalized. So there's 92% of the existing economy to be transformed into new forms of products. So let's try to understand from a consumer point of view why consumers choose one product form over another. So for example, let's compare the CD to the iPod. And let's look at what the consumer is doing from a process point of view. Because listening to music is very much like a process. It's like a production process, like making cars, but it's much easier. So like in any process, there's input, operations, and output. So input is what you need to do the operations. That would be getting the songs, getting the music equipment. Operations is using the input to make it happen, so to have music, to play music. And the output is whatever results is coming out of the operations. So, for example, the feeling of being really happy because you're listening to your favorite music, or the feeling of being with friends and listening to music. So let's look at these 3 or 4 different activities right here. So buying music, preparing the equipment, selecting the song, and changing songs. And if you try to position this on a graph, you can, for example, so what the problem, so what the consumer is trying to do, and the quality of the solution. For example, the iPod versus the CD. So you see that the CD here is right here. So it's the origin of the graph. So you're comparing the CD. You're comparing the iPod to the CD, and you're going to see if you'll be asking your consumers, do you believe that listening to or buying music on the spot is very important? And apparently here it's very important and prevalent, meaning that many consumers believe that would want to access their music and buy music anywhere they are. Now it's clear that if you look at the solution, it's 10x, meaning that the iPod is making it 10 times better to buy music through an iPod than to buy on a CD. Because when you have to buy on a CD, you have to go to a store. It takes a lot of time. So if you just take as a KPI the time it takes to buy music, the iPod experience is 10 times better, or even more than 10 times better than the CD. And so doing this, you can really sort of compare product forms between one another and understand why consumers have chosen one product form over the established one. And the colors represent the different steps in the process, so input, operations, and output. Okay, so the sense of the iPod sort of beat out the CD because it is providing a process that's better for the consumer. So that means that clients don't buy products, they don't buy technologies, They don't buy services. They buy outcomes. They buy results. And in the case of music, it's simply listening to music. So consumers are willing to buy a new product form if the new product form is making it much easier, much faster, and much simpler, and much cheaper to listen to music. So innovation means improving the client's process, faster, better, cheaper, and at each step in the process. Okay, so that's maybe a first explanation as to why innovation is so important. It's important because they're changing product forms, and if you want to keep your leadership, maintain your leading position, you can use competitive strategies, but these don't work. So innovation is the best bet. Now let's look at another reason why innovation is so important. It's important because it's a value creation opportunity. So I've read through 6 Goldman Sachs reports. Their investment reports, equity research, and 1 report from the Markets and Markets, which is a marketing agency. And then they looked at 7 different technologies, and for each technologies they identified a number of use cases, so ranging from 8 to about maybe 30. And so I added up all the market valuations of each use case in each technology, and I got to this total figure of $1,210 billion. So $1,210 billion, that's a value creation opportunity by 2025. And that's almost as much as the Russian GDP, so that's a lot of money. It's 80% of the cumulated revenue of all French stock index companies, so the CAC 40. So you add up all their revenue, and that's 80% of $1,210 billion. $1,210 billion is twice the accumulated revenue of Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple. So just to say that it's a lot of money. And that's 47% of the French GDP. Okay, so now let's look at what these 7 technologies are and how the value is distributed across these 7 technologies. So you can see here that Factory of the Future is taking about 40% of the total value, accounting for $465 billion. And then there's cybersecurity and artificial intelligence. Now maybe a few words on Factory of the Future. So there are a number of things to say. First of all, Goldman Sachs believes that Factory of the Future is actually a combination of cloud and IoT. So in a sense, in this one technology, there are 2 technologies in the mind of Goldman Sachs. And these 2 technologies are applied to the sort of manufacturing industry. And so that's one explanation as to why that figure is so high. Another explanation is that during the 20th century, we've built a lot of industrial assets, and the sense of Factory of the Future is connecting all of these existing assets to the internet. So there's an installed base that's very significant, and what the sense of Factory of the Future is to connect everything to make it a connected infrastructure. Okay? Cybersecurity is very important because we're connecting everything to the internet. So we've connected computers, people, now objects, and more. Now if you look at these same figures from an industry perspective, so not technology, but really industry, we can see that there are about 10 industries that are making up the $1,210 billion prize. And they appear here. So what stands out is manufacturing, also finance and retail. So manufacturing for the same reasons as indicated previously. We're connecting an existing industrial capability to the internet. Finance because there's new regulations after the 2008 meltdown. And retail because it's always a big opportunity. Okay, so let's look at 8 use cases in the financial industry. So if we look at this and we try to zoom into this finance, what happens? We get to this. So here you can see that there are 8 use cases. They account for $108 billion in revenue by 2025. And again, cybersecurity is the most important and the most value creation, high potential use case. Then there another use case, for example, using artificial intelligence to spot risky accounts where people could default on their credits. This is a very interesting one, but it's complicated to explain. Basically, you use satellites that are sent out in space, and these satellites take pictures of our planet, and doing so, we try to establish the amount of production and reserves, for example, in oil, and then we try to correlate that with real-time demand. And based on this, we make recommendations to adjust production so that it meets demand very precisely. And so this minimizes waste, and it creates a $13 billion opportunity. Okay?
Yep.
Okay, now let's look at the. So that was finance. Let's look at retail. There's a mistake there. It's actually retail. So we're going to be looking at this one right here. So that's 7 use cases, and they account for $132 billion. So there's a lot of virtual reality. Virtual reality is a very important technology in retail. A lot of the value is coming out of AI, whether it's to optimize pricing. We have retailers that are offering like discounts like 20% off, but sometimes consumers are willing to buy even if it was just 10% off. So AI is helping to offer discounts that are really right where they need to be to get a purchasing decision. The same is true for demand prediction, where you would use AI to be sure that you're producing exactly at the right level of output, and that there's not a surplus in production. Okay. So the question that you can ask yourself, but also any investor and any managing director is, there's $1,210 billion up for grabs by 2025. That's in 7 years. So that's a very, very short time span. How much value would you like to take?
Would you like, or would you be able to?
Would you like, or would you be able to take? So, is it 1%? 10%, 20%, 50%?
Able to 1%.
Able to 1%. Okay. So that
10
would be 12 billion. 1%.
Wow.
Good.
So then the next question is, how much are you willing to invest to take 12 billion?
Nothing.
Nothing. Okay. Anyway, so those are. I think it's very. Why do I ask this question? Because, for example, when we do economies of scale, you can say this is going to save us so much, and so many people decide to invest in economies of scale. But innovation is also value creation, and it's important to quantify how much value creation there is. And the European economy did very poorly between 2000 and 2015 to capture this digital value creation. And the Chinese did pretty well, and in the US they went pretty well too. So it would be really bad if we were not able to capture any of this value again. Okay, so why is innovation so important? For 2 reasons: to keep market leadership, and also to capture value to be created. Now let's look at why innovation is so difficult. So this is out of a CB Insights. They studied 257 startups. So they conducted a post-mortem analysis of 257 startups. And they identified the top 20 reasons why startups fail. And these are the answers. So it turns out maybe a few things. First of all, technology failings does not explain why startups fail. most startups are able to create a product that works. That's interesting because when you look at the conversations and listen to the conversations that we have, we tend to talk a lot about technology. And yet, technology is not the reason why innovation fails. Most of the time, technology works. Sometimes we say that we have no money or there's a team problem in the team. Well, these two reasons account for just 15% of the innovation failures. But understanding what our clients are trying to do, understanding the client problem, that accounts for about a third, for about 33% of why startups fail. So really the critical capability, the critical ability is to understand what consumers want, understand their problem, and develop a solution that helps them in whatever they're trying to achieve. Okay?
Okay.
All right. So at Fujitsu, we have, it's become important to become customer obsessed. And so that's how we are trying to meet this challenge of understanding our clients. We're trying to change our behaviors so that we spend more of our time in understanding what our customers are trying to do. And once you have this new behavior, then you get to something else, which is a capability. And I'd like to talk about this. How do you distinguish an innovator that's got good customer understanding from one that has less good customer understanding? So, but before we go that, just a few words to summarize. Innovation is unfortunately very difficult to succeed at because finding an acute and prevalent problem that clients are willing to pay for is very difficult. Okay? Now let's look at what we are developing in terms of methodologies to triple the capital efficiency that's dedicated to innovation. So this is Alan Turing. He's often considered to be the father of artificial intelligence. He played a key role during World War II in cryptography. And in 1950, he developed the Turing Test. So this is the Turing Test right here. So for example, there's an artificial intelligence that's trying to pass as a human being. There's a human being in another room, and there's a jury. The jury's asking questions to the human being and the artificial intelligence. It's the same question that they're asking. And based on the answers, they try to distinguish, spot where's the artificial intelligence and where's the human being. And people say that our AI has succeeded in the Turing Test when it's fooled the jury into believing that it was a human being when in fact it's just AI. So based on the Turing Test, we developed the Benveniste Test, which is the same thing. Only in this case, it's a client that's trying to pass it's an innovator that's trying to pass as his client. So there's a jury that will ask questions, and based on the answers, the client will try to, the innovator will try to pass as his client. So here's an example. Why do you listen to music? And we'll assume that you're the jury. So you ask the question, why do you listen to music? And you get two answers. One is, the new app is amazing. I love it. I get access to all my content, plus I get free ads. And then answer B is, I just need to take a break from the usual hustle and bustle. I need to listen to music, and I need to travel without the trouble. So in your opinion, where is the client and where is the innovator?
Client is right.
So the client is here, and the innovator is here.
Yeah.
Okay? All right? So that's what the jury says too. So you're like the jury. You believe that answer A is coming from the innovator and answer B is coming from the client. And that's true. So we checked, we opened the doors, and we saw that the innovator was sitting in room number 1, and that the client was sitting in room number 2. So the jury was right, so that's great. But unfortunately, the innovator was not able to fool the jury into believing that he was the client. So he failed the first question of the Benveniste Test. Now the Benveniste Test consists in 50 questions that are grouped in 5 categories. So understanding the client's day-to-day. So why does he use the product or the service? Are there any other established products, forms? Does he compete? Does he choose one product form over another in some circumstance, and perhaps in another circumstance makes a different decision? The second group of question has to do with understanding the client's problem. So if it's an acute problem, so causing real pain, if it's widely shared, if it's a problem that the consumer is willing to pay for to see solved, because many clients are super happy to see solutions, they just want them to be free. Also, the solution is, does the solution bring an improvement factor that's measurable? For example, is it 10x, 10 times better than the established product form, or is it worse than the established product form? It could be some product forms in 2000 in the music industry where there were new product forms that were worse than the established one. Now it's obvious that there would be no massive use of these new product forms because they're just not as good as whatever existed at that time. The question on execution has to do with the business model. Is it a business model that's focused on developing a new product, in which case it will require a lot of capital expenditure? Is it developing a new service business model, IP or a platform-based business model? Is the team of innovator, are they able to deliver, assuming you allocate and give them capital? Can they make it happen? And finally, how is scaling and development? Does the solution scale? Do revenues and costs, or actually just revenues, do they scale too? Does the business model scale? So those are the questions, and then we assess each innovator and the innovation team based on two criteria. First, we look at the success rate right here. So there are 10 questions in each category, and the success rate is in red. And these are actually real results. And these real results show that our innovators in France, and this is true in other countries too, are really good at developing a solution, and they're really, really good at executing. But because their understanding of the client's day-to-day and the client's problem is very limited, once you get to the development phase, since clients don't need the product, then the business doesn't scale.
Too bad.
So it's so important to understand what clients, their day-to-day and the problem that you're addressing. And then you can rank each innovator, so there are different colors, 1, 2, and 3. And then you can look at the average, which is purple here, and compare the average. So the average is just the average results of each innovator added up. But then you can have them pass collectively the test and see if the team performance is better than the average. And if it is, that means that they're a good team.
But they're not a good team here.
Yes, they're not. They're less good as a team than as individuals. Now, team building is one reason why innovation fails. So in this case, unfortunately, they're not very good collectively. And then on this axis is the number of clients that you've done the test with, because we want to do this test with multiple clients. They are coming from different nationalities and so on. Okay, so we can help innovators gain a scientific knowledge.
Excuse me, just before, who answered the questions?
The innovators.
Okay.
The jury is asking the questions, and the innovators. We did the test multiple times.
Yeah, but you mentioned in the previous, you mentioned the situation where you compare the answers of the innovators and the clients.
Yes.
But you do that only for the product-related questions, right?
No, for all of them.
For all of them?
Yes. For understanding the client's day-to-day. So why do you use a product? How much money do you spend on music, for example?
Okay. And for example, in execution, how do you phrase the question?
That's a very good question. For execution, it's a different client. It would be an investor.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the client would be
Would
the
change.
the client for the given phase.
That's
and
right.
compare how the innovator stems in the shoes of
An
stands
investor.
in the shoes of an investor.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's yeah.
And that's the salesman.
Development would be an investor or another entrepreneur that succeeded.
Okay.
That developed a unicorn or something like that.
Okay, so the client type changes. And sorry.
So the clients are here. The real consumers are these three questions.
Okay, the real consumer for the three, and then the investors, and the number of clients tested.
Yeah. So that's because.
Is it the red
No. So the red is the success rate.
That's the success rate, and.
Is the number of times that the test was done with a client or with an investor. So here you can see that most innovators do the test with the solution. They test the solution, but they don't test their understanding of the problem. And as you would expect, their success rate is much higher for the solution because it did it more often than here.
Okay, so there's a correlation between how many times they tested with clients and the success rate.
That's correct.
Okay.
But it also shows how we allocate our time and our energy and our resources.
Okay.
And yes?
And does it mean like it's 100% on top of the graph, or is it less than that?
Yeah, 100% would be up in the.
Okay.
Zero.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so we can help our innovators gain scientific knowledge of consumers, and this can boost the capital efficiency that's dedicated to innovation. All right, so if we summarize this conference, maybe a few things. Innovation is very important. It's very important to keep leadership in whatever market you're operating in. It's a value creation opportunity, $1,210 billion by 2025. Unfortunately, innovation is difficult to succeed at because, well, for 20 reasons, but mostly because innovators have a hard time understanding client needs. But we can develop scientific knowledge of client needs with a specific test, the Benveniste Test, which is based on the Turing Test, and then can help us verify and assess whether innovators are on the right track or not. All right, that sums it up.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.